Welcome back to our open book tonight. Still no progress in our area downstairs, but I have been enjoying. Hi there, John Mahoney and Andre Elizabeth Mitchell and Carla Dickinson and Mr. Dickens and Laura Tierney and Robin Foreman and SR and Rhonda, Rick Dabrowski, Ali Feldman Pilch, Michael Trujillo, Karen Smith, Ralph Rice. Very good to be with you. I have been moved and struck all over again by the 60th anniversary of this remarkable In Cold Blood, the in some ways founding document of was then called the New Journalism. Terrible murder of the Clutter family, 1959, resulted in the publication first in the New Yorker, then the book in 1966. Truman Capote, as I recollect in my weekly newsletter a few weeks ago, just saw a small squib in the New York Times. Thought that sounds interesting, and called and followed up. Of course, he was joined there by his longtime childhood friend, who later went on to write To Kill a Mockingbird. So quite a duo that showed up. Talk about remarkable duos. So when we left our reading last night, Perry Smith and Dick Hickok had been conveyed back to Kansas. They'd been apprehended in Nevada, in Las Vegas, driven across the country. And here's where they wound up. Truman Capote writes, institutional dourness and cheerful domesticity coexist on the fourth floor of the Finney County Courthouse. The presence of the county jail supplies the first quality, while the so-called sheriff's residence, a pleasant apartment separated from the jail proper by steel doors and a short corridor, accounts for the second. In January 1960, of course, just after the murders, the sheriff's residence was not in fact occupied by the sheriff, Earl Robinson, but by the undersheriff and his wife, Wendell and Josephine Josie Meier. And I'm hoping I'm pronouncing that correctly, Meier. The Meyers, who have been married more than 20 years, were very much alike. Tall people with weight and strength to spare, with wide hands, square and calm and kindly faces. The last being most true of Mrs. Meier, direct and practical woman who nevertheless seems illuminated by a mystical serenity. As the undersheriff's helpmate, her hours are long, between 5 in the morning, and she begins the day by reading a chapter in the Bible, and 10 p.m., her bedtime. She cooks and sews for the prisoners, darns, does their laundry, takes splendid care of her husband, and looks after their 5-room apartment with its melange of plump hassocks and squashy chairs and cream-colored lace window curtains. The Meyers have a daughter, an only child, who was married and lives in Kansas City, so the couple live alone, or as Mrs. Meier more correctly puts it, alone except for whoever happens to be in the ladies' jail. The jail contains 6 cells. The 6th, the one reserved for female prisoners, is actually an isolated unit situated inside the sheriff's residence. Indeed, it adjoins the Myers' kitchen. But, says Josie Meier, that don't worry me. I enjoy the company. having somebody to talk to while I'm doing my kitchen work. Most of these women, you got to feel sorry for them. Just met up with old man trouble is all. Of course, Hickok and Smith was a different matter, for as I know, Perry Smith was the first man ever who stayed in the ladies' cell. The reason was the sheriff wanted to keep him and Hickok separated from each other until after their trial. Thank you for joining us, Cassie Maines Murray. Cassie Manis Murray. Now listen to Josie Meier. The afternoon, they brought them in. I made 6 apple pies and baked some bread, and all the while kept track of the goings on down there on the square. My kitchen window overlooks the square. You wouldn't want a better view. I'm no judge of crowds, she told Truman Capote, but I'd guess there were several hundred people waiting to see the boys that killed the Clutter family. Well, I never met any of the Clutters myself, but from everything I've ever heard about them, they must have been very fine people. What happened to them is hard to forgive, and I know Wendell, her husband, the undersheriff, was worried how the crowd might act when they caught sight of Hickok and Smith. He was afraid somebody might try and get at them. So I kind of had my heart in my mouth when I saw the cars arrive, saw the reporters, all the newspaper fellows running and pushing. But then it was dark after 6 and bitter cold. More than half the crowd had given up and gone home. The ones that stayed, I didn't say boo, only stared. Later, when they brought the boys upstairs, the first one I saw was Hickok. He had on light summer pants and just an old cloth shirt, surprised he didn't catch pneumonia, considering how cold it was. But he looked sick all right, white as a ghost. Well, it must be a terrible experience to be stared at by a horde of strangers. To have to walk among them, and them knowing who you are and what you did. They brought up Smith. I had some supper ready to serve them in their cells, hot soup and coffee. What an amazing woman, and sandwiches and pie. Ordinarily, we feed just twice a day, breakfast at 7:30, and at 4:30 we serve the main meal. But I didn't want those fellows going to bed on an empty stomach. Seemed to me, either Donald Strantle, seems to me they must be feeling bad enough without that. But when I took Perry Smith his supper, carried it in on a tray, he said he wasn't hungry. He was looking out the window of the ladies' cell, standing with his back to me. The window was the same view as my kitchen window, trees in the square and the tops of houses. I told him, just taste the soup. It's vegetable and not out of a can. I made it myself. The pie, too. In about an hour, I went back for the tray, and he hadn't touched a crumb. He was still at the window like he hadn't moved. It was snowing, and I remember saying, it was the first snow of the year, and how we'd had such a beautiful, long autumn right until then. What a soul she had. And now the snow had come, and then I asked him if he had any special dish he liked. If he did, I'd try and fix it for him the next day. He turned around and looked at me, suspicious, like I might be mocking him. And he said something about a movie. He had such a quiet way of speaking, almost a whisper. Wanted to know if I had ever seen a movie. I forget the name. Anyway, I hadn't seen it. I never have been much for picture shows. He said this show took place in biblical times, and there was a scene where a man was flung off a balcony, thrown to a mob of men and women who tore him to pieces. And he said that was what came to mind when he saw the crowd on the square. The man being torn apart. And the idea that maybe this was what they might do to him. But it scared him so bad his stomach still hurt, which is why he couldn't eat. Of course, he was wrong, and I told him so. Nobody was going to harm him, regardless of what bad he'd done. Folks around here aren't like that. We talked some. He was very shy, but after a while he said, "This is amazing. One thing I'd really like is Spanish rice." So I promised to make him some, and he smiled kind of, and I decided, well, he wasn't the worst young man I ever saw. Now remember, she works at a prison. That night after I'd gone to bed, I said as much to my husband. But Wendell, the undersheriff, after all, snorted. Wendell was one of the first on the scene after the crime was discovered. He said he'd wished I'd been out at the Clutter place when they found the bodies. Then, he said I could have judged for myself just how gentle, that's in italics, Mr. Smith was. Him and his friend Hickok. He said they'd cut out your heart and never bat an eye. There was no denying it, not with 4 people dead. And I lay awake wondering if either one was bothered by it. The thought of those 4 graves. Firstly, the insight, the instinct insight that Truman Capote had to meet and interview Josie, find out her part of the story. Absolutely amazing. I have welcomed the opportunity to get to reread and know this book all over again. Absolutely amazing. Well, tomorrow night we will have our promo for this week's show, which I believe, as some of you know, will include J-Lo, Yo-Yo, and Willem Dafoe. Interviewed Willem Dafoe today. Didn't get a chance to tell him what company he'd be sharing. So I will do that, I suspect, from the office tomorrow night. So thank you for being with us on an open book. Very good to be with you, and we'll see you, about a week. See you later. Take care. Blessings to you, Dorothy Joy and Linda Grimm, and all of you. Carla, really? Well, let's get on it. Take care. Bye-bye.